Hey everyone, so it's mid-November and we've had a pretty good fall salmon fishing season on the Chilliwack River. I didn't actually film a coho fishing episode this year because we did that last year, and if you want to check that out, look up lure fishing for Vedder River salmon from November 2017, I think. But like I said, we had a pretty good season. This year's return has been excellent. The hatchery has had over 16,000 fish returning to it. Just to give an idea how many that is, last year we had just over 10,000 in total. So it's almost doubled. So a very good season. We have very good coho salmon fishing. Most of the fish were between 4 and 8 pounds, and the odd bigger ones as well. Unfortunately, the fishing for coho has tapered off, but that doesn't mean the season's over, because we're going for some CHUM salmon today. And today's Nina's coming on with me. Many of you have been asking why Nina hasn't been in a video for what, 3 years? 4 years? 6, 7, no. That's because Ellie's only 6-year-old, just turned 6, so she's been looking after the kids at home while I'm out fishing, well, filming. But for once, we get to come out together and enjoy a bit of fishing. So let's go, and hopefully we get some nice CHUM salmon today.
Bopping. Oops, come on.
Hey, first fish of the day.
And I wasn't paying attention and it broke off.
Oh, broke the jig off.
That was my lucky jig. We've been fishing for around an hour or so and we weren't getting anything. All of a sudden it just turned on and everyone is getting fish. And I lost one, and then Bob, our friend, got one, and then I got this one. It's a nice female. And she even has a few lice on her. Right there. There it goes.
Well, I hope you guys have enjoyed this short evening session on CHUM salmon fishing. It was very, very enjoyable. We got into quite a few fish. CHUM salmon tend to be looked down by many anglers for some unknown reason. Out of the 5 Pacific salmon species, I think most people find that it's the most undesirable species out there. But I actually think it's very, very enjoyable when it comes to CHUM salmon fishing. I haven't done it for a few years, and this year I started doing it again. Yeah, it was actually pretty fun. And if you find the right kind of fish, if they're not too old, they can be fantastic on the fishing line. I just want to take a moment to go through the tackle that we used for this video, because a lot of people have asked about it. So let's just go through that, the rod, reel, and float, and etc. that we use for this session. So for CHUM salmon, because they tend to be a little bigger than coho salmon, a little stronger, you want to go a little heavier on the fishing gear. For coho salmon, I tend to go as light as I can. I use rods that are rated between 6 and 10 pounds, 6 and 12 pounds. But for CHUM salmon, I've been using this rod. This is a G-Loomis E6X. It's rated between 10 and 20 pounds. It's 10 foot long. And this rod has been fantastic for me. I can't say enough good things about it. It's very, very strong, not too stiff. The fish can still put up a good fight. But by using this rod, you can actually cut down the fishing time, the fighting time for you, but also for the fish if you want to release it. This rod retails in the $200 to $300 range, but you can also find other brands like Shimano, Claris has the same rod in a similar specs you can use as well. Definitely shop around, but definitely use the right rod for the right species. So to go with this rod, the E6X, I use the Shimano Tranx 300. This is slightly bigger than the Corrado 200 that I use for coho salmon. Not only has a slightly bigger line capacity, but it's much, much stronger. So look at the size of the handle, and it has a much bigger gear ratio, which means you can bring the fish a lot faster, a lot more easily. I've actually used this setup for Chinook salmon on the Vedder River back in September, and those fish were between 10 and 20 pounds and even bigger, and I found that was a lot easier on me, and also, like I say, on the fish as well. Nina used it for this video, and for her arms and wrists actually not very, very strong, and she tended to have problem bringing bigger fish. And in the past, she has used coho salmon gear fighting CHUM salmon, but in the end, she actually couldn't bring the fishing. I actually had to bring the fishing for her because her wrist would just be hurting too much. But for this particular session, she used this setup, and she found that she could actually bring the fishing pretty easily and in a very short amount of time as well. So she really enjoyed it, and that was really good to hear. So definitely go out and to your local tackle store, take a look at what's available, and pick the right rod for the right fish species that you're catching. For CHUM salmon, we tend to just float fish for them in rivers, float fish for them. And for floats, for this year, I've been using Top Shelf floats. So these floats have been around for the last few years. It's a relatively new brand, and it's pretty good. I'm pretty impressed with them. So there are 2 different styles that I could have picked from. So these are the teardrop floats, which are more streamlined, and you have the cigar shaped float as well. Originally, I wanted to go with this one, and Danny at Top Shelf Float told me that I should try out the cigar floats because these are fantastic for salmon and steelhead. So I gave it a go, and I actually really, really loved it. So for the teardrop one, it's great for lake fishing. Earlier in the season, I used these ones for trout in lakes. You can go back and check it out in the previous episode. But for this time, the cigar shaped float, it's actually a little tapered. So you can see it's a little thick on the top and a little thin on the bottom. So it is a little tapered, so which I think it does help when it comes to getting a bite where you'll go down a little faster. Dark green on the bottom, to camouflage a little bit, to blend in with the water. So if this is brightly colored, I think the fish will probably see that and it will spook them quite easily. The two-tone, we have the orange and the bright yellow border on the bottom as well. That gives it a good sharp contrast between the orange and the green, so that the orange part will stand out a lot better on top of the water, especially under low light condition. So these floats come in many different sizes. So we have 25 grams, 30 grams, 25 grams, and we have 20 grams, and then you have 14 grams. So the number on the float, it's a recommended number, the recommended amount of weight that you should put on your line to balance the float. So 14 grams, you should put roughly around 14 grams of weight on the line to balance that float, so that the orange part will sit just above the water. But that's just a recommended number. So a lot of times you might want to go a little higher, a little lower, depending on the water conditions, depending on the current, the current strength, how fast the water is flowing, how deep you're fishing. Those all come or factors you have to take into consideration when it comes to balancing a float. So balancing a float, you can use the sliding weight like I've done. If you know how much weight you need to use for your float, like I do, I just use the sliding weight. Or you can use split shots. You can use, the reason split shots are good is so that you can put more on if you don't have enough weight on the line. Or if you have too much weight on the line, you can actually take split shots off one by one. That way you can actually balance your float pretty accurately. So down from the main line, at the end of the weight and the swivel, we have the leader. So this leader here is roughly around 1.5 feet to 2 feet long. You don't want to use one that's too long, because then it starts drifting all over the place and then you actually lose sensitivity when it comes to getting bites. So for leaders, you want to go with fluorocarbon. Oh, go back a little bit. So the main line, we use 15-pound test mono for chum salmon. You can go down to 12-pound if you want, but 15-pound is more, I guess it's safer for me. So fluorocarbon for leader. So this is Seaguar STS 12-pound. You can use 10-pound if you want. I like to go with 12. It's slightly stronger, depending, you want to get into bigger fish, right? So fluorocarbon line, less visible in the water, a little thinner, a little stiffer. They do perform better when it comes to fishing. You tend to get more bites and you lose less fish as well. So presentation-wise, you can use bait to catch chum salmon. You can use some yarn. You can use wool, but we go with jigs. So these are marabou jigs. They're weighted. So because they're weighted, you got to take that into account when you're balancing your float. This is a 1/8 ounce bead head. So you got to have to use a little less weight on here. Otherwise, that float is going to go underwater. So just take that into account when you're balancing a float using a jig. The reason we're using jigs, because chum salmon are very aggressive. This is basically a weighted fly in the water. By drifting this in the water, the marabou feathers will actually puff up and down, and that will trigger the fish to bite. Chum salmon are very aggressive in general, so they'll bite pretty frequently. They're not very hard to entice, and these jigs are very, very effective. You can tie your own jigs, or you can go into the local tackle stores and buy your own as well. Buy your jigs that way. Pre-tied jigs are pretty good. You can just put them in your tackle box like that. I have my spoons, I have my jigs as well, and you can just put them on the line. The reason I use bait for this time of year, like I said, because you're already getting so many bites with these, it's not really necessary. But also late in the season, the water's cold, the weather's cold, you don't want to mess around with baits with getting wet hands, and you can stay warm by staying dry, and don't have to change the presentation after every cast. So there you have it. Oh yeah, so balancing the float, we talked about that. Adjusting the float depth. If you're fishing a jig head, weighted jig head, because this will sink further down, you don't want to fish too deep. So for example, if you're fishing in 5 feet of water, balance your float, adjust your float depth to around, let's say 3 feet. You don't want this jig head to be hitting the bottom. That way you'll snack up on the bottom, it will snack into fish. And if you snack into the chum salmon, lots of you have done that before, you know how much hassle that can be, right? So like I said, chum salmon are very aggressive. So if you're drifting this in the water, if they're sitting near the riverbed, they'll look up and they'll actually come up and grab that jig pretty regularly. So there you have it. It's a pretty simplistic setup when it comes to chum salmon fishing. Like I say, anyone can do it. It's such an easy fishery for entry-level anglers. For those of you who have never done river fishing before, want to get into consistent results, you should try chum salmon fishing. Early in the season, in October, you tend to find a lot of dirty fish, a lot of fish that are in the river. They tend to be more colored, but I find that if you fish around early November, mid-November, you can get into quite a few really clean, bright fish. And I'll show you some photos right here. Not sure why that is, but my theory is kind of like late in the season, because of the rain, water's a little higher. So fish that are coming to the Fraser, they don't have to hold at the river mouth. They can shoot straight up into the river, and they tend to retain that ocean bright color, which is great. I mean, you get into one of those big fish, big silverfish. It's pretty fun. So, anyways, but definitely go out and try it out. You can find chum salmon if you're fishing the Chilliwack Vedder River. You can find chum salmon pretty much throughout the whole river. But lower down, the lower you go, the fresher the fish there will be. So, hope you find this pretty helpful. And for next season, hope you guys can get out and try out this fishery yourself as well. This is actually going to be our second last episode of 2018. And I kind of just want to take this opportunity to thank you guys for watching throughout the whole year. It has been a pleasure producing these videos for you guys. And it's been a lot of fun. And I'm really happy to be able to do this and present, showcasing you guys all the different fisheries right across this province and outside this province as well. And we will bring you more video content in 2019. And just keep checking. Thank you for supporting. And be sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel. Check out on Instagram because the Instagram, I'm putting up more regular updates as well, besides the YouTube videos that are coming out once every couple of weeks or so. So yeah, Merry Christmas. Happy New Year. And there's one more episode coming up next week, hopefully, or the week after that, before Christmas. And it's going to be on saltwater salmon fishing. You don't want to miss that one. It's at a new location. So anyways, until next time, good luck fishing. That's alright, it's fine. You should have stayed there because it's funny.
We had Nina one.
Okay.